The sun rose over Aba with its usual brilliance, painting the city in shades of gold as the hum of commerce filled the air. Traders pushed carts along the busy streets, their voices rising in sharp haggles. Market women, with babies strapped to their backs, called out the prices of yam, palm oil, and smoked fish. It was a city alive with promise, a place where dreams were not only dreamed but made real by sweat and persistence. Among the men who had carved their fortune in this bustling city was Ogu. His name carried weight, people spoke it with respect, sometimes with envy. His cloth business had grown beyond Aba's markets, reaching across towns, and his circle of friends included not just fellow merchants but even high-ranking officers in the military. Ogu walked with the confidence of a man who believed he had mastered life. At his side stood Ugada, his wife of many years. She was tall, graceful, with a beauty that seemed to hush a room when she entered. But beyond her looks was a quiet wisdom, a gift of foresight that often balanced her husband's pride. Together they had built a home blessed with 5 children, 3 sons, lively and mischievous, and 2 daughters, tender and bright-eyed. Their compound was filled with laughter, the clatter of little feet, and the warmth of family. But beneath Aba's glittering surface, a shadow stretched longer with each passing day. The eastern region's call for independence grew louder, until at last it shattered into war. Rumors of fighting in other towns reached Aba, carried on frightened lips. Families began to pack hurriedly, moving their wives and children back to their villages, where the farms could sustain them and danger felt more distant. One evening, after serving her husband his meal, Ugada sat beside him. Her hands twisted nervously in her lap as she spoke. "Ogu, my husband," she said softly, "we should consider leaving Aba. The signs are not good. The children would be safer at home, among our people." Ogu set down his cup, his eyes steady, his voice carrying the calmness of a man too sure of himself. "Ugada, you worry too much. My friends in the army assure me that Aba is secure. This war will not reach us here. Besides, what would people say if I abandon my business and flee like a coward? No, we will stay. Our home is here." She wanted to argue, to press the weight of her fears into his heart, but she also knew her place. He was her husband, and to disobey him openly would be unthinkable. So she remained silent, though sleep became a stranger to her, and she watched with heavy eyes as some of her friends departed, their families disappearing into the uncertain safety of the villages. Weeks later, the storm broke. Gunfire cracked in the distance, and soldiers marched through Aba's streets. Panic swept through the city like a wildfire, consuming the calm that Ogu had so stubbornly clung to. Markets emptied, laughter died, and hunger crept into homes like an unwelcome guest. It was then that Ogu turned to his wife, his voice strained with regret. "Ugada," he said, almost a whisper, "prepare the children. We must leave at once." The urgency in his tone needed no explanation. She gathered their belongings in haste, her heart pounding as she tied wrappers, bundled food, and pulled the children close. But by then, they were no longer alone in their flight. The roads were filled with carts piled high, bicycles creaking under heavy loads, and people, thousands of them, walking with fear etched into their faces. Progress was slow, agonizing. Every mile felt like an eternity. They left Aba, but only managed to reach Amechi, where the press of humanity halted them. Stranded, they found themselves in a camp, a cluster of displaced families all clinging to survival. Life there was cruel. The days dragged by with little food to share, water that made bellies ache, and the constant cry of hungry children piercing the air. Disease spread quickly, and death became a familiar neighbor. Ugada fought fiercely for her children, trading what little she could, rationing food with desperate care. But her efforts could not outpace hunger. 2 of their children grew weaker by the day, their eyes losing the spark of life. When they finally slipped away, the silence they left behind was unbearable. Ugada wept until her body ached, clutching Ogu as though he could shield her from the pain. Ogu, once so proud, so confident, could only bow his head in grief, realizing the cost of his hesitation. The war dragged on, and the family endured, broken but alive. When at last peace returned, they stepped out of the shadows of survival into a world that was forever changed. Aba no longer shone with the same brightness. Ogu carried himself differently, the weight of regret bending his shoulders. He spoke less, listened more, and never again dismissed his wife's wisdom. For he had learned, in the harshest way, that foresight and humility are greater treasures than wealth or pride, and that the loss of 2 innocent lives would forever remind him of the cost of waiting too long. The story of Ogu and Ugada teaches that wisdom, humility, and timely decisions are more valuable than wealth or pride. No matter how successful one becomes, ignoring the voice of caution, especially from loved ones, can lead to devastating consequences. It reminds us that true strength lies not in status or connections, but in the ability to listen, foresee danger, and act before it is too late. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share for more videos.